The morning session of the Galactic Council began like any other. Representatives from 47 species filed into the massive chamber, their various forms filling seats designed to accommodate everything from the floating Vex to the crystalline Morphians. But something was different today. Something was missing. The human section sat empty. At first, nobody noticed. The council had thousands of members, and absences happened. Maybe the humans were running late. Maybe they had a conflict with another meeting. Chancellor Brexton called the session to order and began reading through the day's agenda. An hour passed. Then two. Has anyone seen Ambassador Deho? Asked Councillor Vexler during a brief recess. A few representatives glanced at the empty human seats and shrugged. The Zenthari delegate, a tall being with purple skin and 4 arms, laughed. Probably still sleeping. You know how humans are. Always complaining about their circadian rhythms. But by the afternoon session, the absence felt strange. Deho was never late. In 15 years of service, he had missed exactly 3 sessions, each time with advance notice and a replacement. His deputy Hoanwu should have been there if Deho couldn't make it. But his seat was empty too. All 12 human council seats sat vacant. Junior analyst Curvin, young Telcorian with green scales and careful eyes, decided to check on the human embassy during the evening break. The building was dark. Curvin approached the main entrance and found it unlocked. Inside, the lights were off. The reception desk was clean and bare. No files, no computer, no personal items. Just furniture. Curvin moved through the building with growing unease. Every office was the same. Desks cleared. Computers removed. The walls showed lighter rectangles where pictures had hung. In Ambassador Deho's office, a chair sat pushed back at an angle, as if someone had just stood up and walked away. But the desk was empty. The shelves were empty. Even the coffee mug Deho always used was gone. The analyst ran back to the council building and went straight to the chancellor's office. Sir, the human embassy is abandoned. Brexton looked up from his datapad, annoyed at the interruption. What do you mean, abandoned? Empty, sir. Oh, people. No equipment, nothing. Perhaps they're renovating. Did you check their residential quarters? Curvin hadn't. Within an hour, a full security team was moving through every human facility in the capital city. Apartments empty. Shops closed. The human school building was locked and dark. The medical clinic, where Dr. Youngmi had worked for 20 years, had a sign on the door that said closed permanently. No explanation. No forwarding information. By midnight, reports came in from across council space. Every human embassy on every world was empty. Human trading posts had been cleared out. Human ships were gone from every docking station. On the colony world of Theta 7, the human settlement that had existed for 40 years was deserted. Houses locked, gardens beginning to wilt, but not a single human remained. How is this possible? Brexton demanded. There are millions of humans in council space. How do millions of people disappear overnight? Not overnight, sir, Curvin said quietly, reviewing the data. It happened over 72 hours, but very quietly. They packed up and left. Every single human, every family, every business, every station. They're just gone. The council held an emergency session. For the first time in 300 years, they met in the middle of the night cycle. Representatives arrived confused and worried. When Brexton explained the situation, the chamber erupted in noise. Where did they go? Why didn't they tell us? Is this some kind of threat? Did we do something wrong? That last question came from Curvin, who was taking notes in the back of the chamber. Several representatives turned to glare at the analyst. The Zenthari delegate stood up. We did nothing wrong. If the humans wanted to leave, they should have said something. This is childish behavior. They did say something, Curvin said, pulling up old records on the main display screen. 3 months ago, Ambassador Deho requested time to address the council about what he called systematic concerns affecting human participation. The request was marked as low priority and never scheduled. We have thousands of requests, Brexton said defensively. We can't address every minor complaint. Was it minor? Curvin asked. They left, Chancellor. All of them. The Council sent diplomatic envoys to human space immediately. The border of human territory had always been open. Human worlds welcomed visitors. Human stations cheerfully traded with anyone. But now, as the Council's fastest ships approached the border, they received a simple, automated message. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for the opportunity to participate in galactic civilization. We now pursue our own path. We bear no hostility to any species. However, we ask that Council ships respect our border. Do not enter human space. Do not attempt contact. We wish you well. The message repeated in every known language. It was polite. It was clear. It was final. The envoy tried to send a response. We need to talk. We need to understand what happened. Please, let us speak with someone. No answer came. Back at the Council, representatives argued about what to do next. Some wanted to send a military fleet to demand answers. Others said that would make things worse. A few suggested respecting the human request and moving on. Brexton asked. They were council members. They had responsibilities. They can't just leave. But they did, Kervin said. The analyst had spent the day reviewing records. Human contributions to the council. Human staff members. Human scientists and engineers and doctors and teachers. The numbers were strange. Humans held very few official positions. Out of thousands of council jobs, humans had maybe a few hundred. Yet they seemed to be everywhere. Kervin found their names in project files, as consultants, as advisors, as contractors. They were the people who fixed problems nobody else could solve. Sir, Kervin said to the Chancellor, I think we should look at what the humans actually did here. I'm finding something odd in the personnel files. Later, Brexton said. First, we need to figure out how to bring them back. But Kervin had a terrible feeling that bringing them back would not be easy. The humans hadn't left angry. They hadn't sent threatening messages. They hadn't demanded anything. They had simply calculated that they were not wanted here, and they had left. Without saying a word, without a fight, without drama, they just left. And now the empty chairs in the council chamber seemed very loud in their silence. The first week after the human departure was busy but manageable. The council formed committees to investigate what happened. They reviewed security footage and communication logs. They interviewed people who had worked with humans. Everyone had the same story. The humans had been normal, professional, and friendly right up until they left. No one saw it coming. We'll adapt, Chancellor Brexton announced to the press. The council existed for thousands of years before humanity joined us. We welcomed them as members, and we're sad to see them go. But galactic civilization is strong. We'll recover within a few months. The statement received widespread approval. Most species felt the same way. The humans were nice enough, but not essential. Life would go on. Then the supply shipments started arriving late. The first sign was small. Medical supplies to a colony world arrived 3 days behind schedule. The local administrator complained, but nobody worried much. Delays happened. But then another shipment was late, and another. Within 2 weeks, half the supply runs in council space were running behind schedule. What's going on? Brexton demanded of the logistics director. We're not sure, sir. The routes are the same. The ships are the same. But somehow, everything is taking longer. Kervin found the answer in the old shipping records. A human named Tae Young had worked as an independent logistics consultant. He wasn't a council employee. He just contracted with various shipping companies. His job was simple: optimize routes. He would look at a delivery schedule and find ways to save time and fuel. Hundreds of companies used his services. When Kervin contacted these companies, they all said the same thing. Taeyong had sent them a polite message 2 weeks before the departure. He was retiring from the business. He thanked them for their partnership. He provided his final route calculations and wished them well. Can't we just use his last calculations? Brexton asked. We are, sir. But trade patterns change daily. Taeyong was updating routes constantly. Without those updates, efficiency is dropping. Then hire someone else to do what he did. They tried. They hired the best logistics experts from 3 different species, but none of them could match Taeyong's results. The shipping delays grew worse. Meanwhile, medical stations across Council Space reported a strange problem. They were running out of supplies. Not everything, just specific items. Sterile bandages, certain medications, surgical tools. The head of the medical council checked the supply chain, found something disturbing. 60% of medical manufacturing in Council Space had been done by human-owned companies. Those companies were gone now. The factories were shut down. The patents were locked. We'll make our own, the medical council decided. They sent the old medical supply specifications to other manufacturers. But those manufacturers ran into problems. The specifications were incomplete. Critical steps were missing. The quality wasn't right. Dr. Youngmi had owned one of the largest medical supply companies. Her products were considered the best. In Council Space, other manufacturers had tried to copy her work for years, but never quite succeeded. Now they understood why. Youngmi had kept key details secret. She had her own methods, her own formulas. And she had taken all that knowledge with her. On the agricultural colony, Theta 7, a more immediate crisis developed. The automated farming systems began malfunctioning. The machines that planted seeds and harvested crops were producing errors. The local technicians tried to fix them but couldn't understand the control systems. "This programming makes no sense," one technician complained. "The code is incredibly complicated and there's no documentation." They called in expert programmers from across the sector. Everyone agreed the code was brilliant but almost impossible to follow. Whoever wrote it was a genius. Eventually someone found a comment hidden deep in the code. It said, "Refactored by engineer Haiyan Wu, year 2391, original system improved by 40% efficiency." Haiyan Wu had been the human deputy on the council. Nobody knew he had also been working on farming systems in his spare time. Nobody knew he had rewritten the code that fed billions of people. And now nobody could understand what he had done. The colony sent an urgent message to the council. "We need help. Our harvest is failing." Brexton assured them that solutions would be found. But privately, he was getting worried. These problems were appearing everywhere. Communication networks were running slower because human programmers had maintained the translation systems. Mining operations were halting because human engineers had designed the drilling algorithms. Power stations were experiencing fluctuations because human technicians had calibrated the reactors. How did we not notice how much humans were doing? Brexton asked Kurvan. The analyst had been digging through personnel files for days. "Because they didn't have official positions, sir. Look at this." Engineer Haiyan-Wu was officially just a council deputy, but I found his name in the maintenance logs of 40 different systems. He was consulting, volunteering, fixing problems when asked. Nobody tracked it because he wasn't being paid for most of it. Why would he work for free? I don't know, sir, but he wasn't the only one. I'm finding hundreds of humans who did the same thing. They had regular jobs, but they also helped out whenever something needed fixing. They never asked for credit. They just did the work. The council tried to contact humanity again. They sent messages explaining the problems and asking for help. The automated response was the same as before. Polite, distant, final, no human replied. 3 weeks after the departure, the Mercolian space fleet discovered a serious issue. Their jump drive calculations were producing errors. Ships were arriving off target. Small errors, just a few thousand kilometers, but enough to be dangerous. The fleet's head navigator reviewed the calculations and found something shocking. These equations have been wrong for 20 years. We've been making basic mathematical errors, but somehow our ships always arrived at the right location anyway. Someone was correcting our mistakes. They found old communication logs. A human mathematician named Jiho had been sending suggested revisions to the fleet's navigation department for years. Polite messages that said things like, "I noticed a small error in your last calculation. Here's a correction." The Mercolians had accepted the corrections without realizing they needed them every single time. Jiho was gone now. The corrections had stopped. The Mercolian fleet's navigation was failing by the end of the first month. Economic reports showed a 35% drop in interstellar trade. 3 major corporations declared bankruptcy. The Xanthari homeworld, which had never experienced food shortages, suddenly couldn't feed its population. They depended on imports organized through human trading networks. Panic buying began across council space. People hoarded supplies. Prices increased. Governments tried to maintain order, but the problems kept multiplying. Kurvan presented findings to an emergency council session. I've been reviewing the employment records. Over the past 10 years, humans applied for 9,000 council positions. Only 3,400 applications were approved. Every rejected human was more qualified than the candidate who got the job. That's not possible, a counselor protested. The data is here, sir. The humans who were rejected had better education, more experience, and higher test scores. But they were rated lower on something called cultural fit. That rating reduced their final scores by 40% on average. The chamber went silent. Are you saying we discriminated against humans? Brexton asked quietly. I'm saying the hiring system did, sir, whether anyone intended it or not. This is ridiculous, the Xanthari delegate said. We gave humans opportunities. They were council members, were they? Kurvan asked. Or did we just let them fix our problems while giving credit to others? Nobody had an answer for that. 3 months after the humans left, council space was falling apart. What had seemed like manageable problems had grown into a full crisis. The infrastructure of galactic civilization was breaking down, and everyone was starting to understand a terrible truth. The humans hadn't just been members of the council. They had been holding it together. The hospital ships were in the worst trouble. They couldn't make the medicines that patients needed. Chemist Sora had owned a pharmaceutical company that produced 60% of the council's medical supplies. Her formulas were special. They worked better than anyone else's products. They had fewer side effects. They saved millions of lives every year. Other companies tried to copy Sora's work. They analyzed her medications and attempted to recreate them. But something was always wrong. The medicines didn't work as well. Sometimes they didn't work at all. Sora had encrypted her formulas before she left. Without the keys, nobody could reproduce her work exactly. People were dying now. Not many yet, but the numbers were growing. Patients with diseases that should be curable couldn't get the right medicine. Hospital administrators sent desperate messages to the council. The council sent desperate messages to human space. No response came. On 6 different worlds, terraforming projects had stopped. These were massive efforts to make planets suitable for life. They took decades and required careful environmental control. A human named Dong Haiyan had designed the climate models for all 6 projects. His calculations told the terraforming teams exactly what to do, how much water to add, which gases to release, where to plant the first organisms. The teams still had Dong Haiyan's original models, but those models were based on starting conditions. 3 months had passed. Conditions had changed. They needed updated calculations. Dong Haiyan had always provided updates every few weeks. Now there were no updates. The teams tried to calculate the changes themselves. They failed. Climate is complicated. Dong Haiyan had spent 40 years becoming an expert. Nobody else had his knowledge. Without proper guidance, 2 of the terraforming projects began to fail. Atmospheres became unstable. Temperatures swung wildly. Millions of people had invested their savings in these colonies. Those investments were now worthless. The defense grid protecting council space started experiencing blackouts. Entire sectors would lose protection for hours at a time. This was terrifying. The galaxy had dangerous areas, pirates, hostile species, natural hazards. The defense grid was supposed to keep council space safe. The security director investigated and found that human programmers had rewritten most of the defense software over the past 20 years. The original code was old and inefficient. The humans had modernized it. They had made it faster and more reliable, but they had written it in a way that only they fully understood. Now nobody could maintain it properly. Why did we let them control our security systems? a counselor demanded. We didn't let them, Curvin explained. They volunteered to fix problems when our systems failed. Every time they rewrote something, they made it better. We were happy to let them do the work. We just never learned how they did it. Chancellor Brexton called another emergency session. Curvin presented the full scope of the crisis. The analyst had spent months investigating human contributions to the council. The results were devastating. Humans held only 8% of official council positions, Curvin reported, but they performed 43% of essential functions. They did this by volunteering, consulting, and fixing problems in their spare time. They trained other species. They corrected mistakes that others made. They prevented disasters that nobody else saw coming. And they did all of this without asking for credit. The chamber was silent as Curvin continued. I analyzed the council's employment system. The algorithm that scores job applications has built-in bias factors. There's a measurement called cultural fit. It's supposed to assess how well a candidate will work with others. But the way it's calculated systematically favors certain species over others. Humans scored 40% lower on average. Not because they couldn't do the jobs, but because the system labeled them as nonconformist. That's not discrimination, a counselor argued. That's just cultural preference, is it? Curvin pulled up more data. Look at performance reviews. The humans who did get jobs were rated as excellent workers 92% of the time. But they were promoted at half the rate of other species with the same ratings. When humans applied for senior positions, they were rejected even when they had more experience than any other candidate. Why didn't they complain? Someone asked. They did, sir. I found 2,400 formal complaints filed by humans over the past 30 years. Every single complaint was marked as insufficient evidence and closed without investigation. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted at each other. Some defended the council's practices. Others demanded to know why nobody had noticed this before. Brexton called for order, but it took several minutes to restore quiet. We need to fix this, the chancellor said finally. We need to bring the humans back and make things right. How? Curvin asked. We've sent dozens of diplomatic missions. They won't talk to us. We've offered incentives. They ignore them. We've sent our finest negotiators. The humans turn them away at the border, and we threaten them. Economic sanctions. Trade restrictions, Sir Curvin said quietly. We already did that. Look at the trade records. Humans paid triple the docking fees at most stations. They were charged extra taxes on imports. Their businesses faced stricter regulations than others. We were already sanctioning them. They just never called it that. Brexton sat back in his chair, looking defeated. Meanwhile, the crisis was spreading beyond economics and infrastructure. Old rivalries between council species were resurfacing. The Xanthari and the Velthians had a long history of conflict. For decades, that conflict had been peaceful, thanks to careful diplomacy. Now they were arguing again. Trade disputes, border tensions, accusations of cheating and theft. Curvin found records showing that Ambassador Deho had been quietly mediating Xanthari-Velthian disputes for 15 years. He would meet with both sides privately, help them find compromise, and let them announce the solutions as their own ideas. Neither species realized how many of their agreements had come from Deho's suggestions. Without that mediation, the old hatreds were returning. Within 4 months of the human departure, a minor border skirmish broke out between Xanthari and Velthian ships. 3 vessels were destroyed. 72 people died. It was the first military conflict in council space in 100 years. The council tried everything to contact humanity. They sent cultural envoys. They sent religious leaders. They sent children with messages of peace. Every group received the same treatment. Human border patrols detected them, escorted them politely to the border, and sent them home. No violence. No hostility. Just firm refusal. One diplomatic team tried to sneak into human space using a stealth ship. They wanted to reach a human world and start a dialogue. The humans detected the ship immediately. Human vessels surrounded it and escorted it back to the border. The team was released unharmed, but they received a message. We bear you no ill will. We simply choose not to continue this relationship. Respect our decision. That was all. No anger, no threats. Just a clear boundary. Back in council space, society was fragmenting. Some species blamed the Zenthari for being too harsh with humans. The Zenthari blamed the Velthians for stealing human patents. The Velthians blamed everyone for not appreciating human contributions. Protests erupted on multiple worlds. Some people demanded the humans return. Others said good riddance. Curvin watched it all and understood something that the council didn't want to accept. The humans weren't going to come back. They had made a calculated decision. They had determined that the council would never truly value them. So they left, not in anger, but in dignity. And now the council had to live with the consequences of taking good people for granted. 6 months after the humans left, the council faced an impossible situation. Critical systems were failing faster than they could be fixed. The council needed solutions, and the only place to find them was in the sealed historical archives. These archives contained detailed records of everything the council had done for thousands of years. They were sealed because opening them required unanimous agreement from all. 47 member species. Chancellor Brexton called for a vote. We need to understand exactly what the humans did for us. The archives will show us their complete contribution records. For the first time in 300 years, the sealed archives were opened. What they found inside changed everything. Curvin led the investigation team. They started with simple questions. What patents did humans register? What positions did they hold? What projects did they work on? But as they dug deeper, they found something much more disturbing. They found the human perspective. Humans had kept detailed logs of their time in council space, personal journals, official reports, private messages. The logs covered 80 years of membership. They told a story the council had never seen before. The investigation team found Dr. Youngmi's journal first. She had been a medical researcher for the council. Her official record showed 17 published papers and 3 patents. But her journal told a different story. One entry read, "Today I presented my cure for Velthian rot syndrome to the research committee. It took me 8 years to develop. The testing was successful. The cure works. Tomorrow, Dr. Wexler will present my findings to the Medical Academy as his own discovery. My name won't appear in the paper. This happens every time. But the Velthian children will live. That has to be enough." The team checked the records. Dr. Wexler had indeed presented a cure for Velthian rot syndrome. He had received the council's highest medical honor for it. He became famous across the galaxy. Youngmi's name appeared nowhere in the official record. They found dozens of similar entries in her journal. Cures she developed. Procedures she invented. All credited to other researchers. Youngmi never complained publicly. She just kept working and let others take the credit. Next, they found engineer Hyanwoo's personal files. He had been Ambassador Deho's deputy, but he was also an engineer. His logs showed something remarkable. Over 20 years, Hyanwoo had applied for 47 different engineering positions in the council. He was rejected every time. The reasons given were always vague. Not enough experience. Not the right cultural fit. Other candidates were more suitable. But Hyanwoo's qualifications were extraordinary. He had 3 advanced degrees. He had designed systems that were used across council space. He had more experience than almost anyone else in his field. Still, he was rejected. His last message to his son explained why he supported the departure. We weren't angry. We were tired. Tired of proving ourselves every single day only to be invisible. Tired of being good enough to do the work but never good enough to receive credit. Your mother and I decided you should grow up somewhere you're valued. Somewhere your accomplishments matter. Investigation team found Ambassador Deho's final report to Earth. It was written 2 weeks before the departure. The report was marked classified by human authorities, but a copy existed in the council archives. Curvin read it aloud to the emergency council session. Recommendation: complete withdrawal from Galactic Council. Reasoning: after 80 years of membership, humans have contributed significantly to Council civilization. However, these contributions are systematically unrecognized. Council employment systems contain structural bias against human candidates. Patent theft from human inventors is routine. Educational discrimination against human children is widespread. Multiple attempts to address these issues through official channels have failed. The Council does not hate humanity. They simply do not see us as equals and likely never will. Our continued presence enables their dysfunction. Departure may teach what our presence could not. We bear no ill will. We simply choose dignity over acceptance. The chamber was absolutely silent. Curvin continued reading. Attached to this report is a list of human contributions to the Council over the past 50 years. For the historical record, the list was staggering. Humans had prevented 14 wars through quiet diplomacy. None of those peace negotiations were credited to humans in the official records. Human innovations had increased Council efficiency by 340% over 20 years. Those innovations were rebranded and attributed to other species. Humans had solved the plague of worlds that had killed billions across the galaxy. The vaccine was officially credited to a Mercolian research team. The human scientists who actually developed it were listed as laboratory assistants. Every major Council success in the past 50 years had human involvement that was deliberately erased from the historical record. Why? A counselor asked. Why would we do this? Curvin had found the answer in the Council's own internal communications. Private messages between Council leadership over the decades. The messages were honest in a way public statements never were. One message from 30 years ago read, "The human delegation is becoming problematic. They work too hard and make others look bad. We need to limit their official positions while still benefiting from their talents. Suggests we reject most human applications but continue to use them as consultants and contractors. This way, we get their work without giving them political power." Another message from 20 years ago. The human inventor Jin Su has developed a revolutionary engine design. If we credit him officially, it will make our own engineers look incompetent. Suggest we buy the patent through a shell company and reassign credit to his Anthari engineer. Ginsu will be compensated financially but will not receive public recognition. Message after message showed the same pattern. Council leadership knew humans were talented. They deliberately used that talent while denying humans credit and advancement. It wasn't accidental bias. It was intentional policy. Curvin leaked the findings to the public. The analysts knew this would end their career, but it had to be done. The people of Council space deserved to know the truth. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Protests erupted on every Council world. Some species were ashamed and demanded reforms. Others became defensive and denied the evidence. Some claimed the humans had fabricated the records. Others argued that the Council had the right to prioritize its own founding species over newer members. Society polarized. Families divided. Long friendships ended. The Council that had stood united for thousands of years was tearing itself apart on the Zenthari homeworld. A massive protest movement formed. Young Zenthari were particularly angry. They had grown up believing the Council represented fairness and equality. Learning the truth about human treatment shattered that belief. They demanded Chancellor Brexton resign. They demanded the entire Council leadership be replaced. Similar protests happened across Council space. But just as many people defended the Council's actions, they argued that every civilization has hierarchies. They said the humans should have worked harder to fit in. They claimed the whole crisis was humanity's fault for being too sensitive. In the middle of this chaos, Curvin received a private message. It came through unusual channels, encrypted, untraceable. The message was short. "Thank you for telling the truth. This is not for our benefit. We have moved on. This is for those who come after us, so it doesn't happen again." The message wasn't signed, but Curvin knew it came from someone in human space. Probably from Ambassador Deho or someone close to him. Chancellor Brexton tried to maintain control. He gave speeches about learning from mistakes and building a better future, but his words rang hollow. Everyone knew the truth now. The Council had used humans for decades. while keeping them as second-class members. And when the humans finally left, the entire civilization nearly collapsed. Then another message arrived from human space. This one was public. It was broadcast across all channels. We watch your struggles. We could help. We won't. Not because we're cruel, but because you must learn to value those who support you before you lose them. Some lessons come too late to save what was lost, but perhaps not too late to save what remains of your future. Learn from this. Be better to those who remain. The message was credited to Ambassador Deho. It was the first time humans had spoken directly to the Council since the departure, and it made everything clear. The humans weren't coming back. 1 year had passed since the humans left. Council space had stabilized, but at a terrible cost. The civilization that once spanned 10,000 worlds now effectively governed only 6,000. The rest had collapsed into isolation or conflict. Trade was down 60%. Medical care was worse. Technology had stopped advancing. The golden age was over. Curvin sat in the council chambers, looking at the empty human section. The chairs remained exactly as they were the day the humans left. Nobody had moved them. They had become a memorial. People called them the empty chairs. School children visited to learn about the mistakes of their elders. The analyst had been promoted to senior advisor, not because of skill, but because so many experienced leaders had resigned in shame. The council needed people, and Curvin was willing to do the work of trying to fix what had been broken. New policies had been implemented. The employment system was completely redesigned. Job applications were now reviewed blind, with no species identification. Cultural fit measurements were removed. Only skills and experience mattered. Mandatory training on bias awareness was required for all council officials. An independent oversight committee reviewed discrimination complaints. Most importantly, monuments were erected across council space. They showed empty chairs with plaques that read, "The empty chairs, lest we forget." In memory of those who built our civilization while we failed to see them, history curricula in schools were revised. For the first time, human contributions were properly credited. Children learned how Dr. Youngmi cured diseases while others took credit. How Engineer Haienwu designed systems that saved millions of lives. How Ambassador Deho prevented wars that nobody else knew were coming. How chemist Sora made medicines that still couldn't be replicated. The lessons were harsh. Teachers didn't hide the council's failures. They explained exactly what had been done wrong, why it must never happen again. But knowing the truth and fixing the damage were different things. The cost of the human departure was almost incomprehensible. Economic analysts calculated that council space had lost 2.3 trillion lives worth of productivity. Translated into actual numbers, that meant lower living standards, shorter lives, and lost opportunities for billions of people. 847 billion economic units in damages, not from any attack or disaster, but simply from losing the people who held everything together. 73. Relationships between species were permanently damaged. The old conflicts that humans had quietly mediated were now open wounds. 2 species had left the council entirely, declaring it corrupt beyond repair, and the council's reputation across the wider galaxy was destroyed. Young civilizations that once dreamed of joining now looked at what happened to humanity and stayed away. The council had shown itself to be exactly what every small civilization feared: a club that used people for their talents while denying them equality. Chancellor Brexton had resigned 6 months after the truth emerged. The new chancellor was a younger leader named Torvin, who had been vocal in criticizing the old policies. Torvin understood that words and monuments weren't enough. Real change required real action. "We need to prove we've learned," Torvin said during his first address to the council. "Not to the humans. We lost that chance. But to ourselves, and to those who remain with us." Those words became more important than anyone expected. 15 months after the human departure, a junior analyst noticed something in the population data. A small species called the Valerians were facing discrimination in council systems. Insectoid beings with careful minds and gentle natures. They held very few council positions despite being members for 50 years. The analyst brought this to Kervan's attention. Kervan investigated and felt sick. The pattern was identical to what had happened with humans. Valerian applications rejected at high rates. Valerian innovations credited to others. Valerian complaints ignored. It was happening again. Kervan prepared a report for the council. But before presenting it, a message arrived from human space. It was addressed to Kervan personally. It came from Ambassador Deho. We've watched your reforms. We see your monuments. Words and symbols are easy. We'll know you've learned when you treat your current members as you now claim you would have treated us. The Valerian people face discrimination in your system similar to what we experienced. Prove to them what you couldn't prove to us. The message shook Kervan deeply. The humans were still watching. Still caring about justice, even after everything that happened. And they were right about the Valerians. Kervan presented the findings to Chancellor Torvin privately first. We're doing it again, Chancellor. Everything we did to the humans, we're doing to another species. Torvin read the report in silence. When finished, the Chancellor looked exhausted. How did we not see this? Because the Valerians are small in number and quiet in nature. Like the humans were, they work hard and don't complain. So we ignore them. Then we stop ignoring them. Immediately, Chancellor called an emergency session. This time the response was different. When Torvin explained the situation, the chamber didn't erupt in denial or excuses. Instead, there was a long, painful silence. Finally, the former Zenthari delegate, who had dismissed human concerns a year ago, stood up. I was wrong about the humans. I said they were being dramatic. I said they should have worked harder to fit in. I was wrong then, and I won't be wrong again now. We need to fix this immediately. The vote was not unanimous. Some representatives argued that change takes time. Some said the Valerian situation wasn't that bad. Some wanted more study before taking action. But it passed. 78% support. Not unanimous, but enough. Within a week, 3 Valerian candidates were promoted to senior council positions. Not because they were Valerian, but because they were qualified and had been unfairly overlooked for years. A Valerian representative was appointed to the council's leadership committee. The first non-founding species to hold that position, the council issued a public apology to the Valerian people. Not a vague statement of regret, but a specific acknowledgement of failures. They listed examples. They accepted responsibility. They outlined concrete steps for improvement. And they offered reparations. Financial compensation for Valerian inventors whose patents had been stolen. Guaranteed funding for Valerian community projects. Priority consideration for Valerian businesses in council contracts. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't undo years of discrimination. But it was real action. It's not just words. Kervan watched a young Valerian engineer present an innovation to the council 2 months later. The engineer had developed a new water purification system. It was brilliant, efficient, would help millions of people. The council gave the engineer immediate funding and full credit. The engineer's name would be in every report, every patent, every publication. No one would take this accomplishment away. The council chamber erupted in applause. Real appreciation. Real respect. After the session, Kervan received another private message. Again, untraceable. Again from human space. Thank you. Not for us. We've moved forward, but thank you for them. It's no signature. Just those simple words. The humans weren't coming back. They had built their own civilization now based on the lessons they learned from being undervalued. They knew their worth. And they were thriving. But they hadn't abandoned their principles. They still cared about justice. They still watched to make sure others didn't suffer the same treatment they had endured. Kervan understood something in that moment. Redemption wasn't about getting the humans to return. It was about becoming the council that deserved their respect, even if that respect was only given from a distance. The empty chairs remained in the council chamber, permanent reminders of what had been lost. But now they represented something more than regret. They represented commitment, a promise that no other species would be invisible again. On the border of human space, automated beacons transmitted a message to all passing ships. Kervin had read the message many times. Humanity welcomes trade, dialogue, and friendship with all species as equals. We left not in anger, but in dignity. We do not return, but our door remains open to those who understand the difference. Equal relationships, mutual respect, dignity. The Council had failed to offer those things when it mattered. They had taken good people for granted. They had used their talents while denying their worth. And when those people finally left, the entire civilization nearly fell apart. Now, slowly and painfully, the Council was learning. Learning to value those who support them before losing them. Learning to recognize contributions instead of taking them for granted. Learning that true strength comes from respecting everyone, not just those in positions of power. It was a hard lesson. It came too late for humanity. But perhaps not too late for the Valerians. Not too late for the other small species in Council space. Not too late for the civilization. That remained. Kervin returned to work, reviewing applications for Council positions. Each application was reviewed carefully now. Skills evaluated fairly. Experience respected. No bias factors. No cultural fit measurements. Just honest assessment of ability. It wasn't perfect. Change was slow and painful. But it was happening, and somewhere beyond the borders in human space, people were watching.